I had just wrapped up my shift, the kind of night that felt like a blur of sirens and tired eyes. Being on the late-night patrol in a city that never really sleeps, you get used to the unease. But tonight, something felt different. It wasn't the usual call-outs, the reckless drivers, or the petty crime that had started to feel routine. It was the phone call. Came in just after 2 a.m. The kind of call you don't want to pick up, but know you have to. Dispatch was frantic, her voice crackling through the static. Unit 57, we need you to check out an abandoned house on Old Mill Road. Multiple reports of unusual activity. That's all she said, no further details. Unusual activity could mean anything, but when it's this late, your instincts kick in. And mine were telling me this wasn't just another noise complaint or drunken kids. I grabbed my gear and headed out to my cruiser, the cool air biting through my jacket as I slammed the door shut. Old Mill Road was just outside of town, surrounded by thick trees and a handful of rundown houses. The kind of place no one goes unless they have no other choice. The road was deserted. I was alone, except for the occasional flicker of streetlights that seemed more like weak glimmers of something watching you. My headlights cut through the dark, reflecting off old, forgotten buildings. When I turned onto Old Mill, I could see the house in question looming in the distance. Old, abandoned, the windows boarded up, the door hanging off its hinges. It looked like something out of a nightmare. I slowed down as I pulled up to the driveway, my heart beginning to race. There was no sign of life, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me from behind the walls. Dispatch hadn't given me much to go on. No names, no specifics, just the strange call that didn't make sense. I stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching beneath my boots. The air was still unnervingly so. It felt like the kind of silence that presses on you, waiting for something to break it. I pulled out my flashlight, shining it across the property. Everything seemed still, too still. Then I heard it, a low creak, a floorboard somewhere in the house. I froze. It wasn't just the wind, that much I knew. My breath hitched as I slowly made my way toward the front door. The creak came again, louder this time, followed by a distant whisper. A voice so faint I almost thought I imagined it. But it was there, just beneath the wind. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I reached the door and peered inside, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. Everything was covered in dust, but there were signs that someone had been here recently. A discarded jacket, a broken chair, the kind of things you don't leave behind unless you're in a hurry. I stepped inside, the door creaking behind me, closing with a soft but final thud. My heart was racing now, my instincts screaming at me to turn around, but I couldn't. Something was pulling me deeper into the house, into the dark. And that's when I saw it. Two glowing eyes in the far corner of the room. It was watching me. I froze. The eyes weren't reflecting light. They were glowing on their own, as if something or someone was staring at me from the corner of that pitch-black room. My hand instinctively moved toward my sidearm, but I didn't pull it out. Not yet. I couldn't make out what it was. My flashlight flickered in my hand, its weak beam barely cutting through the oppressive darkness. The whispering stopped, but the eyes stayed fixed on me, unblinking. I tried to steady my breathing, trying to convince myself it was just an animal. Maybe a cat or some other creature that had wandered in. But this felt wrong. Way too wrong. I took a cautious step forward, my boots barely making a sound against the old wooden floor. The eyes didn't move. My heart was pounding in my chest, louder than anything else. The silence was suffocating. I forced myself to move closer, inching toward the corner where I saw the eyes. As I got closer, the shape started to become clearer. It was hunched, its body too still for any living creature. The air grew colder, a chill creeping into my bones, and I could swear I felt a presence. Something watching me from all directions. "Who's there?" My voice came out quieter than I intended, trembling with the fear I was trying to suppress. No answer, but the eyes, they slowly shifted. Not away from me, but towards the ground, then back up. As if whatever was there was processing me, sizing me up. My instincts screamed to run, to get out of that house, but I couldn't leave without knowing what was going on. What had drawn me here in the first place? Then I heard it. A soft scraping noise from the floor behind me. Something dragging, slow, and deliberate. I spun around, my hand now fully on my gun, ready to draw. But nothing was there. The house was silent again. Too silent. But as I turned back toward the corner, the creature had moved. It wasn't standing still anymore. It was coming toward me. Its limbs were twisted in ways they shouldn't be, and its eyes, those glowing eyes, never left mine. It seemed to float, almost as if the floor beneath it didn't matter. The temperature dropped another few degrees, my breath visible in the frigid air. And then I saw it, the face. It was a face, but not like any face I'd ever seen. Twisted, stretched, skin so pale it was almost translucent, veins running like rivers beneath it. Its mouth was wide, unnaturally wide, but it didn't speak. Instead, it made a sound, a low, grating sound, like fingernails scraping against glass. The air around me grew thick with the smell of rot, overwhelming and nauseating. I backed away, my mind scrambling for a reason, a rational explanation for what I was seeing. But none came. I was paralyzed, unable to move, to even breathe properly. The creature took another step toward me. And then, with one sharp, bone-chilling screech, it lunged. I barely had time to react. My heart slammed in my chest as the creature lunged toward me with terrifying speed, its mouth opening wide enough to swallow me whole. Instinct took over. My hands fumbled for my gun, and I managed to draw it just in time. I squeezed the trigger without thinking, the deafening sound of gunfire shattering the tense silence. The creature screeched, a high-pitched, inhuman sound that made my skin crawl. But it didn't stop, kept coming. The bullet had grazed its side, but the thing didn't even flinch. It was as if the shot had no effect at all. I stumbled backward, tripping over debris, falling hard onto the floor. The creature was on me in a heartbeat, its cold, bony hands grabbing for my throat. I could feel the weight of its presence, the pressure in the air so thick it was suffocating. The stink of decay and rot burned my nose as its face hovered inches from mine. Its eyes never blinked, just stared into me, through me, as if it were digging into my very soul. I gasped for air, struggling to break free from its grip, but its strength was unnatural. It was as if it had no bones, just pure, twisted force. My hand reached for my flashlight, which had fallen beside me, and with a desperate effort, I swung it at the creature's head. The light flashed across its face for just a moment, and that's when I saw it. The face wasn't just pale. It was wrong in ways I couldn't explain. The skin stretched tight over its skull, but beneath, I saw something else. It was as if its flesh was a mask, something that didn't belong. The horror of it hit me like a truck, and in that split second of shock, the creature let out a guttural growl and released its grip on me. I scrambled to my feet, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My mind raced. I needed to get out. I needed to get help. But how could I leave something like that behind? The house seemed to close in around me, the walls pulsating with an eerie, unnatural energy. I could still hear its breathing, slow and deliberate, like it was savoring the fear in the air. I dashed for the door, but as I reached for the handle, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of something dragging itself toward me, crawling across the floor. I turned just in time to see the creature, now fully on the ground, its limbs twisted at impossible angles as it crawled toward me with an unnatural speed. I didn't think. I ran. The house felt like a maze as I bolted through the dark, every turn leading me deeper into the nightmare. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to keep going. The door was so close, just a few more feet. I could hear it behind me, its screeching, unearthly sound growing louder. I threw myself against the door, my shoulders slamming into it as I forced it open. The cold night air rushed in, and I didn't hesitate. I sprinted toward my cruiser, the only escape I could think of. I jumped into the driver's seat, my hands still shaking as I fumbled to start the engine. The creature's shrill cry echoed through the night, but I didn't look back. I didn't dare. The car roared to life, and I sped out of there like a bat out of hell, my heart still pounding in my chest. But the worst part, the part that still haunts me to this day, the part that keeps me awake at night, is that as I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror, and I saw it, the creature, standing at the edge of the property, watching me leave. I didn't stop driving. Couldn't. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened, but nothing added up. The creature, whatever it was, had to be some kind of hallucination, right? I had to be losing it. But then why had I shot at it? Why had it felt so real? My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles white. The road blurred as I sped down it, desperate to get as far away from that house as possible. But no matter how fast I went, the image of that creature stayed burned in my mind. Its eyes, its twisted limbs, the feeling of its cold hands around my throat. Couldn't shake it. It was like it was still there, chasing me, even as I drove further away. I don't know how long I drove. It felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than 30 minutes. Finally, I reached the city limits, the familiar lights of town offering some small comfort. I pulled into the parking lot of the police station, the engine sputtering to a stop. But even then, I didn't feel safe. I stepped out of the cruiser, my legs weak, and walked into the station. The officer at the front desk looked up as I entered. He gave me a quick, knowing glance, like he could see the panic in my eyes before I even spoke. "Everything okay, Sheriff?" he asked, his voice casual. I shook my head, the words stuck in my throat for a moment. I couldn't just tell him what happened, not without sounding like I'd lost my mind. But I had to say something. I need backup. There's something going on at that house on Old Mill Road. Something bad. I don't know what it is, but it's not human. The officer blinked, clearly not expecting that. "What exactly are you saying, Sheriff?" "I don't know." I ran a hand through my hair, trying to calm myself. "I was just there. It's not just an abandoned house. Something is there. Something unnatural. Tried to kill me." The officer stared at me for a moment, then stood up. "Let's go check it out," he said, grabbing his radio. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want anyone else involved. But I couldn't let whatever that thing was just stay there. It was wrong. Couldn't be allowed to live. I had to know what it was, what it wanted. As we drove back to Old Mill Road, the air seemed heavier, thicker than before. The night felt oppressive, as though the darkness itself was closing in on us. My hands shook against the steering wheel, and I kept glancing over at the officer, but he didn't seem fazed. Maybe he hadn't seen what I had. Maybe it was just me. Maybe it was all in my head. But when we reached the house, I knew. The door was wide open. The house was dark, but not quiet. From inside, I could hear the same scraping, dragging sound I had heard earlier. The unmistakable sound of something moving through the house. My heart stopped. It was waiting for us. The officer's radio crackled to life, but he quickly turned it off, eyes fixed on the house. We both stood there for a moment, staring at the open door. The air felt thick, as if the very atmosphere was pushing us back, warning us not to go any further. But we had no choice. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears as I made my way toward the door. The officer followed closely behind, his hand resting on the grip of his firearm. But I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. He was probably wondering if I was crazy, if I had just hallucinated the whole thing. We stepped inside together, the creaking of the floorboards echoing in the stillness. My flashlight flickered as I swept it across the room. Everything looked the same as when I had left. Dust, broken furniture, abandoned like it hadn't been touched in years. But the sense of something being wrong, of something being there with us, was overwhelming. And then we heard it, the scraping again. It was coming from deeper in the house. Slowly, methodically, I raised my hand, signaling for the officer to stay back. I didn't want him to get too close, not after what I had experienced. I didn't know how to explain what was coming, but I had a gut feeling we were in way over our heads. I motioned for him to follow me, my legs shaky but determined. As we moved deeper into the house, the sound grew louder, closer. The hallway was long, narrow, the walls covered in peeling wallpaper. I could barely make out the shadows at the far end of the hall. As we crept forward, I noticed something strange. The door to the basement was ajar. and it was from there the source of the noise. I glanced at the officer, but he didn't say anything. He just nodded and gestured for me to go ahead. We were too far in now to turn back. I took a deep breath and approached the basement door, my flashlight beam trembling in my hand. I hesitated for a moment, then kicked the door open with a force that echoed through the house. And that's when I saw it. The creature. It was crouched in the corner of the basement, its back hunched and its head tilted upward, staring directly at us. Its eyes gleamed like twin orbs of fire, glowing even in the dim light. It was still, too still, as if it were waiting, watching, calculating. It had no mouth, just a gaping hole in the middle of its face where one should have been. The space around it seemed to distort, like the shadows themselves were bending away from it, leaving a small pocket of unnatural cold. The smell of decay, of death, was even stronger down here. I should have run. I should have backed away. But something held me there. I was frozen. And the officer, he wasn't moving either. It was like we were both trapped, caught in its gaze. My body wouldn't respond. My legs wouldn't move. My mouth wouldn't speak. It was the worst kind of fear, the kind that paralyzes you. And then the creature shifted. Slowly, deliberately, it began to stand. It wasn't just standing up, it was growing, stretching upward, its limbs extending at unnatural angles, its skin tightening as it reached for the ceiling. I could hear the bones creaking and popping as it morphed into something taller, something worse. I pulled my gun, but it felt useless. What could I do against that? The officer finally seemed to snap out of whatever trance had taken hold of us both. He raised his weapon and fired. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the basement, but it didn't faze the creature. It just kept coming, growing, reaching for us. And then, with an awful guttural sound, it lunged at the officer. The officer never stood a chance. The creature lunged with a speed and ferocity that made my heart skip a beat. Its limbs twisted, snapped in ways that shouldn't have been possible, and in one swift motion, it was on him. The officer didn't even have time to scream. He was thrown against the wall with a sickening thud, his body crumpling like a rag doll. I stood there, frozen, the weight of the situation crushing me. My gun was still in my hand, but I couldn't move. The creature was now on top of the officer, its grotesque form towering over him, its glowing eyes locked onto mine. For a split second, everything went silent. It was as if time itself had stopped, and all I could hear was my own ragged breathing. Then, the creature made a sound, a low, guttural growl that vibrated through my bones. It was as if it was savoring the fear in the air, relishing every moment. The officer's body twitched once, then twice. He was still alive, barely. I could see the blood pooling beneath him, his eyes wide with terror, but he wasn't moving. The creature had him pinned, and it seemed content to let him suffer. I snapped out of my paralysis, my instincts kicking in with a fierce urgency. I couldn't just let this thing kill him. Couldn't let it take me either. I fired again, aiming for the creature's head this time. The shot rang out, loud and deafening, but it didn't flinch. It didn't even look at me. It was too focused on the officer, too consumed by whatever twisted hunger it had. The bullets had no effect. My mind raced. I had to do something. I couldn't just stand here and die. I couldn't let it take another life tonight. I glanced around the basement, my eyes desperately searching for something, anything, that could help. That's when I saw it. An old, rusted pipe sticking out of the wall. It was long, sharp, and looked heavy enough to do some damage if I could get close enough. I didn't think about the danger. I didn't think about the creature. I just ran. I bolted across the basement, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps, my heart hammering in my chest. The creature turned just as I reached the pipe. Its eyes met mine, and I saw a flash of recognition. It knew what I was trying to do. It didn't want me to get close, but I wasn't going to stop. I lunged forward, grabbing the pipe and swinging it with every ounce of strength I had. The creature screeched, but the pipe hit its side with a sickening crack, staggered back, but it didn't fall. Its glowing eyes narrowed, and it seemed more enraged than ever. It let go of the officer, its clawed hands slashing through the air as it advanced on me. But this time I didn't freeze. I kept swinging, aiming for its face, for its eyes. The thing shrieked, but it kept coming, its body contorting and shifting as it moved toward me. Just as it reached for me again, something shifted in the air, an almost electric charge that ran through my veins. I had no idea what it was, but it felt like the walls were closing in, like the house itself was alive, pressing us together in some kind of sick, twisted game. And then, for a brief, fleeting moment, I saw something, a figure standing in the doorway, a tall, shadowy figure watching us, watching the creature. It wasn't human. It was tall, cloaked in shadows, with eyes that glowed the same unnatural hue as the creature's. But there was something different about it, something that seemed to repel the creature. Before I could react, the figure raised its hand, and the creature froze. Its limbs locked in place, its body stiffened, and the glow in its eyes flickered. And in that moment of paralyzing terror, I knew this wasn't over. Couldn't be. The air in the basement felt like it was charged with something ancient, something powerful. The creature was still frozen, its glowing eyes dimming, its twisted form trembling as if caught in some kind of invisible grip. And that figure, standing silently in the doorway, was the cause. It hadn't spoken a word, but its presence radiated a force I couldn't explain. I couldn't tell whether it was friend or foe, but one thing was clear. The creature was no longer in control. The figure took a step forward, its movement slow, deliberate. As it did, the creature let out a low, muffled growl, but it didn't move. Its limbs remained locked in place, like it was being held back by something stronger than it. I stood there, frozen in place, watching this strange battle unfold before me. The officer, still alive but barely, was slumped against the wall, too weak to move. His eyes were wide with terror, watching the figure in disbelief. I could barely comprehend what was happening, but one thing was undeniable. This was no ordinary person. No human being could command that kind of power. The figure stopped just a few feet from the creature, and without a word, it raised its hand once more, pointing directly at the creature. The basement seemed to hum with an energy I could feel in my bones, a heavy pressure building up in the air. The creature's eyes flickered one last time, and then, like a puppet with its strings cut, it collapsed to the floor, its body twitching as if it were dying. The glow in its eyes faded completely, and the unnatural stillness in the room settled over us like a shroud. The figure lowered its hand, and the air seemed to return to normal, though the weight of the moment lingered in the room. It turned toward me, its eyes glowing faintly, and I could feel a wave of understanding pass between us. It wasn't here to harm me. It had saved us. I didn't know what it was or why it had intervened, but I knew we were no longer in danger. The creature, whatever it was gone. For good. The figure took one final look at the officer and me, then slowly began to fade into the shadows. Its form blurred, dissipating into the darkness of the basement, leaving only the faintest trace of its presence behind. I stood there, my breath coming in ragged gasps, trying to process everything that had just happened. The officer, still trembling, met my gaze, and we both knew. We had just witnessed something we would never be able to explain, something that didn't belong in this world. I stayed at that house until the backup arrived, but no one found anything out of the ordinary. The creature was gone. The basement was empty, and no matter how many times I tried to piece the events together, there were no answers. I didn't talk about it much after that. People wouldn't believe me, and I wasn't sure I believed it myself. But the nightmares still come. Every night, I see those glowing eyes, that twisted face, and hear the sound of its scraping claws. I don't know what I encountered that night. All I know is it was real. It was there. And whatever it was, it's not done yet.